In today's lecture video, we will continue to talk about array process. We will have few videos to talk about how to processing array content. And sometimes in order to record the information from the customer or for the student, we have the parallel array we need to use. So this parallel array can help us to record the student name, student grades, and student ID in different array. Then at the end, we will talk about how to using array as the function argument. So that's why we can pass in an array through the function to do the processing. So today's video, we will start talking about processing array content. How to processing array content, we talk about couple example on Monday's lecture. So remember, if we want to display the array content from one by one, so then we can have our index I. We can define an integer called I. So this I will start from 0 less than to the array size. So then we increment each time. So then, for example, if we have an array called test, you can using the index start from 0 less than array size. We were using the for loop to display one by one. So this way is we call the regular for loop. In order to access the array one by one, we need to have an index. So this index, we have the boundary start from 0, then less than the array size. Addition to this one, we also talk about after C++11, we have the range-based for loop. So the same thing if we want to display the array content. The same thing like we say, if we have array size is 5, then we use the initializer. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to fill out the numbers array element one by one. So in C++11 and afterward, we have the range-based for loop. To display the content for the array, then we can have a data type declare and range variable we call val. So this data type need to match the array data type, or we can using auto. So then we declare a variable name. This variable we're using for the range variable from the array numbers. So in each iteration, we will just copy each element from the array to the val variable. So then we can display the val index to display the val value one by one. So on the other hand, this one is using a range-based for loop to display the content for the array. So that's the two different ways we show you how to print the content for the array. You can either using the regular for loop, have the counter. So then this counter actually is the index. Or you can using the range-based for loop. So from this one, you don't need any index. Instead, the compiler will know the beginning and the end of the array. They just copy value to the range variable. So each one here we show you to print the content of the array. A lot of time we need to display the array content, so we can do this. But in this video, we will talk about more about the processing array content. Sometimes we need to print, and a lot of time we have the value in the array we save. So sometimes we want to know the total for each element of the array is what. Or we want to know the average from all the elements of array. Or we want to find the maxima value or the minima value. So that's what we'll talk about one by one. So the first thing, let's talk about how to find the total of the array element. So in order to find the total, that we say sum of the array element. then we need to using a loop, right? So the same thing, if you order to find the total of an array, we need to add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. So on the other hand, right, we need to access the element from the array one by one. So that's why we need to have either a regular for loop or, right, we can do the range base. The first one, that's using the regular for loop to see how we will access the array element one by one to find the sum. Then after we find the sum, of course, we can find the average. So now here we declare two variables we call average and the sum. So don't forget your sum, we need to start from 0. So then here, right, then we have a counter. So this integer, you can have any variable you like. We start from 0 less than the size. So we just access the array through the index. So then we just accumulated the value into the sum. So that here is sum plus equal to the test, then index I. Of course, this one is the same as sum equal to sum plus test I. But I want you to get used to using this syntax. So that's why after the for loop, at the end, we will get the total for each element. So after we find the sum, can we find the average? Yes. So here, when you add element one by one to the sum, we need to using a for loop. So after you got the sum, then we can have the average equal to the sum divided by the size of the array. So then you need to know the size of the array. So in this example, actually we show you how to using a simple regular for loop to add each element of the array. Then we can find the sum. So the same thing, can we using a range-based for loop to do that? Right, so after C++11, we can use the range-based for loop. So this one actually will be the same. I still need to declare our sum. I still need to declare our average. So then one thing is the syntax will be different. So remember here, we will have a variable name. So this variable name will be copied over from the array element one by one. So that's why here, because our array is integer, so then our data type will be integer. So the same thing, this one you can either write like, so either way you want to use the int data type if the array data type is int, or you can use in the auto. So they are equivalent to each other. So then afterward, right, so the same thing, we just add the value to the sum one by one. So of course, at the end, I still need to know the size of the array. So then we can find the average from the sum divided by the size. We don't have sample code for this example. So that's I will go over. Let's go to the example 1, the for loop example. So here we ask the user to enter 6 employees working hour. So how about we just continue to find their average? Right, so that's why you can see here, how should we modify this one? In the for loop, we already have the user to enter the employee working hour. So then how about we can just continue using this for loop to find their sum? So that's why here that's declare two double value. We have sum equal to 0. Then so after we declare the sum equal to 0 and the average, so then right, so when we ask the user to enter the hours one by one, so then we save in the array index. So then how about here, afterward, we just increment our sum. So then we have hours, each index, each element, we just add to the sum. So that's why afterward, you see, after the for loop, we will get the sum. So then if we want to find the average, actually we need to, after we get the sum, so then we will divide. See here we have our constant, how many elements. So that's here is our number employee. So then we got our average. So that's why after we got the user input, we got a display. So then how about at the end, we just display working hour will be sum. So that's here you can calculate the sum and the average. So then let's run the program. So then you see here, we still continue to get the user input. So then the employee 1, 2, so then after we see we display the user enter, then we find the total, then we have the average. So this example I will save that as the chapter 7 example 1 for loop and the sum and average. So the same thing, let's work on the for each loop. How should we calculate the sum and array the sum and average from the for each loop? So here you can see for each loop, actually usually we don't have the size. But now here that's we will have the 10 element. So that's our size equal to 10. So in order to find the sum for those numbers, so then you need to have declare the sum equal to 0. So how to add the sum through the for each loop? So since here we already have the display, right? So then let's just add one more statement. So after we display, how about we just also add the sum, add the value. So that's why after what you will see after the for each loop, we will get the total for each element. So then the same thing after the for loop, so the average will equal to the sum divided by size. So then of course we can display the information. So that's display the information after each number. So we have total of number for the sum and average. So then we can run the program. So you can see here after we add the value add to the sum, so then we can get the sum. So then we get the average, so then we display at the end. So all the number we display. Yeah, earlier we displayed twice, let's just display one time. So then we run the program. You can see, right, we display the number one by one. And at the same time, I just add the value to the sum. So that's how we can get the total of the sum and the average at the end. So that's our for loop or the for each loop to find the sum and average from the array. So after we using the for loop to find the sum of the array, but sometimes we also want to know from our array which element is the biggest number. So that's why the same thing we need to using the for loop. So in order to find the highest value in the array, so the same thing we need to have a for loop. So the first thing, one thing is we need to think about, because we want to find the highest one, right? So we always need to compare the value with each element. So that's why in order to find the highest value in the array, usually you can just have a value we call highest. We define this variable. So this variable actually does assign the first element, the index equal to 0 to the highest. So then the for loop actually will be a little different. The for loop actually will start from 1, less than the size. The reason is because I want to find the highest one. We just assume the highest one, the greatest value actually is at index 0. So that's why later after we have the for loop, we just continue to using the rest of the element to compare to the highest value. So since we assume the index 0 will be the highest one, right? So then so in the for loop, after I read the next element, so if the next element value is greater than the current highest, then I know this one is bigger.